Someone handed me a secret recording.
We've got to get rid of all those loose ends, okay?
For years now, I've been investigating this guy.
What, you stab her in the neck with a knife?
He's known as Mr. Big. His tentacles spread to the very heart of the justice system.
I don't just need it under the carpet, I need it to be fixed.
I'm Alicia Bridges. I find out who he really is in Mr. Big, a new true crime podcast from Unravel. Search for Unravel now on the ABC Listen app.
ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
There's an old saying that loose lips sink ships. We're not on a ship, but we're in the middle of a criminal trial, so I'll just tweak it. Loose lips sink jurors. I'm the ABC's court reporter, Kristian and Silva.
And I'm Stephen Stockwell. It's Thursday the 15th of May and we've just finished the 11th day of this trial. Welcome to Mushroom Case Daily.
The small-town mystery that's gripped the nation and made headlines around the world.
Ms. Patterson admits she lied to police about foraging for mushrooms.
A doctor says he told Erin Patterson she could die without urgent treatment.
At the heart of this case will be the jury's interpretation of Erin Patterson's intentions.
It's a tragedy what's happened. I love them.
Kristian, it was a dramatic day in court today.
Yes.
Can you give us a quick wrap, bring us up to speed on what we saw?
Stocky, today a juror was kicked off the trial after reports emerged that he had been discussing the case with friends and family in what could be a serious breach of the directions given to the jury by Justice Christopher Beale. A toxicologist also took the stand after sifting through the leftovers from Erin Patterson's bin, and he discussed some of the results from the testing undertaken at his lab. We also heard more about what Erin Patterson allegedly said about the beef Wellington recipe and the mushrooms in it.
Thank you, Kristian. Such a dramatic day today in court. We've had, a whole range of emotions and, feelings throughout court, days of laughter, days of, really tense moments, days that have been very emotional. And this morning was just one of shock and disbelief. I think I'd heard the loudest collective gasp I'd ever heard. We had a juror dismissed.
Yeah, we did. This morning, one of the jurors was kicked off the case, and it's a really sickening feeling. When something like this happens, you always fear that, the case could be put at risk or something like that. But Justice Christopher Beale brought the jury in and told them that one of their number was gone. And the reason was that the court had received information that this juror had been communicating about the case with friends and family. And Justice Beale said that information that had been received, that there was a reasonable possibility that it was credible information. So he stressed nothing has been proven, but the jury's now down to 14. If the allegation is true, it is a clear breach of what Justice Beale told this jury at the start of the trial, and that's not to talk about the case with friends and family or with anyone outside of the jury pool. And as I say, a sickening feeling to see a jury member go.
When this was being discussed, I was really worried about what it meant. I was initially worried that we might not be able to continue with the trial. Yeah,
that's always the fear that you have. And to have something like this pop up midway through the trial is certainly not ideal. Thankfully, 15 jurors were empanelled at the start of this trial. There are 3 extra jurors for a reason. This is never the reason you want one to depart, but they're there if someone falls sick or there's a reason why a juror can't continue. Now, of course, at the very end of all the evidence, there will only be 12 who remain. But now, we're down to 14. Not ideal with still a few weeks to go in the trial.
And Kristian, the penalties for kind of breaching the Juries Act, for not following the directions you're given as a juror, can be quite severe, can't they?
They can. It's not a laughing matter. And I'll just take you back to the very first day of this trial when the jury was picked. And this is what Justice Beale said to the 15 members of the jury. He said if they discuss the case with others who were not members of the jury, or if the jury did their own research, they would be committing a criminal offence. And he said here, jurors have even been sent to jail for breaching those directions.
Wow.
Incredibly serious.
Yeah, very serious. Once that matter was dealt with this morning, the trial continued. So we heard evidence, as you mentioned earlier, from a few people. And I think the place I'd like to start with, and the place I'd like to kind of begin our conversation on the day's evidence with, is Dimitri Gerostomoulos. He's the head of forensic science at the Victorian Institute of Forensic Medicine. He's the state's chief toxicologist. And I mean, one of the bits of evidence that he found that came quite close to the end of the day, really, like I think within half an hour of us wrapping up actually, was what he found in the leftovers.
Yeah, that's right. And what the doctor found is actually kind of at odds to what another expert found yesterday. So these were the leftovers that were retrieved from Erin Patterson's bin by police in the days after the lunch. So prosecutors claim that Miss Patterson allegedly laced beef Wellingtons with death cap mushrooms and served them up to the guests. That's the allegation. And they claim that Miss Patterson herself did not consume death cap mushrooms. That's the claim. So yesterday we heard from a mycologist, a mushroom expert, Dr. Truong, who examined these same leftovers under a microscope. So this is a visual test. And from what she could see, there were no death cap mushrooms in the leftovers. Those same samples were sent on to what's called VIFM, the Forensic Medicine Institute, and they were subjected to a different set of tests. These are chemical tests, right? And what Dr. Gerostomoulos is looking for are these things called alpha ammanitins and beta ammanitins.
Right.
These are toxins in death cap mushrooms.
Okay.
Right? So what he says is when he's tested some leftover beef Wellington that's been pulled out of these bins, they have actually detected beta ammanitins in samples of mushroom paste and beef.
Right. So not just the paste. So he's got the whole meal there. He's pulling apart the pastry, the mushrooms, and the beef. He hasn't just found it in the paste. He's found traces of that in other
another
parts
component of the meal. Yeah.
Right. And I think it was this for a moment. This moment today I found really fascinating and quite compelling because it seemed to run just against what we'd heard yesterday from Dr. Truong, who was talking about what she'd found when she was investigating this. And Justice Beale actually jumped in at a point to kind of like help clarify. I'm assuming for the jury's benefit that, look, Dr. Truong was looking through like a visual assessment. She was looking for death cap mushrooms. And what we heard today from Dr. Gerostomoulos was that he was looking on a just totally different level. Like, he explained, I think, that you're not going to be able to see what he found. This is something you can only find by doing tests that he went into a huge amount of detail of, and that I kind of glazed past a bit, I must admit. But yeah, there were the different tests he was doing, liquids, washing things through, chromatology, all of those buzzwords that we heard today. Dr. Gerostomoulos was also talking about the toxins found in the lunch guests as well, and Erin Patterson and her children. What did we hear there?
So like with the testing on the leftovers, samples were also taken from the lunch guests too. So we're talking things like urine samples, hair samples, blood samples, these kinds of things. So he said these toxins were present in samples taken from Don Patterson. They also appeared in samples from Ian Wilkinson. Mr. Wilkinson is the only person from the lunch who survived. He did say that there were no alpha and beta ammanitins found in the bodies of Heather Wilkinson and Gail Patterson, who also died. But I think an important qualification he made about this whole testing process is that the tests produce their best results when the samples are fresh. So he says, if you've consumed death caps and you do a test straight away, the accuracy of that test is going to be much better than if they go and test you 3 or 4 days later, for instance.
Right. Okay.
So we've talked about the lunch guests.
Yep.
He then was asked about Erin Patterson.
Yep. Okay.
And Erin Patterson's test was taken 2 days after the lunch, right? Now, he says no alpha or beta ammanitins were detected in Erin Patterson's samples. He also said that those same toxins were not detected in the samples from her kids, Erin Patterson has said that she served leftovers from the meal to her kids the following night.
Yeah, but that she scraped off some of that food as well. So some of the mushrooms, some of the pastry, we heard that she scraped that off.
That's the story that's been told.
And it's worth pointing out as well that the prosecution is alleging that Erin Patterson ate a different meal to what was served to the lunch guests, that the children ate a different meal than what was served to the lunch guests. So just clarifying.
That is the allegation.
That's the allegation, yeah. As well as hearing from Dr. Gerastimoulos today, we also heard earlier in the day from Katrina Cripps. Now, she's from Child Protection. She actually met Erin Patterson and talked to Erin Patterson on a couple of occasions. Once when she was in hospital at Monash Health, and she also went to her house after she was discharged and spoke to her there, and then on the phone once after that as well. And I want to come to something that Katrina was talking about while giving evidence today, while we're kind of thinking and talking on mushrooms, because during the course of a conversation that she had with Erin at her house, she actually asked Erin quite directly whether she'd foraged for mushrooms for the meal that she cooked for the guests, and Erin just didn't answer.
Yeah, Miss Cripps was one of the many people that had been quizzing Erin Patterson in the days after the lunch about the source of the mushrooms. Now, she said when she sat down with Erin at her house, she directly asked her if any of the mushrooms in the meal had been picked from the wild. She said Miss Patterson did not answer, and I quote, "Erin was looking at her phone," is what Miss Cripps said. Now, Miss Cripps said that Erin Patterson talked about two sources of mushrooms being in this beef Wellington dish, some from Woolworths and some from an Asian grocer from the Oakley or Clayton area. I guess, yeah, you probably got some more questions about that.
Yeah, I do. What else did we hear about the potential source of these mushrooms today?
So when Miss Cripps was talking about this discussion regarding the mushrooms, she said that Erin Patterson told her that these mushrooms, supposedly from the Asian grocer, would add a nice flavour to the beef Wellington. And she said that Erin Patterson had told her she'd actually bought these mushrooms a couple of months earlier, and her original intention was to put them in a carbonara. But when she opened the packet, they had a very strong smell. So Erin Patterson has told her that she put them in a Tupperware container. So she's pulled them out, a few months later, and has told Katrina Cripps that she decided to use them in the beef Wellington and used all of them, actually. When it came to the beef Wellington, Miss Cripps gave more evidence about her discussion with Erin Patterson, and Erin Patterson is said to have told her that the reason she made a beef Wellington was she wanted to try something new and special, and that's why she decided to make the dish.
We had a bit more detail today about the source or the recipe that was used for this. Nagi, one of Australia's favourite recipe authors, makes another appearance in the Erin Patterson trial.
Yeah, Miss Cripps said that Erin Patterson said the recipe had been found in Recipe Tin Eats cookbook. This is the same author who was brought up last week, I think it was, or perhaps the week earlier, when Erin Patterson's Facebook friends testified that many of them were fans of Nagi and her work.
Yep.
So Miss Cripps said that Erin Patterson told her that the meal that was prepared was a beef Wellington with some mashed potato, green beans, and packet gravy. Now, when Dr. Gerastimoulos, his test results were shown on the screen, we actually saw some pictures of the samples that he was analysing, and there was actually a gravy jug and something that appeared to really resemble gravy.
Right, okay. As well as the detail we got today about this meal, about the mushrooms, Ms. Cripps also spoke a lot about what Erin told her about her relationship with Don and Gail Patterson. These are the parents of her estranged husband, Simon, and she was talking about how she thought of them like her own parents, really painted a picture of what seemed to be, at least at one point, quite a close relationship with them, that she thought of them like their own parents. I found that really interesting, just how tight they were, at least for that period in time. This
was in the process, I suppose, of telling Miss Cripps a bit about the story of who was at the lunch. And she did say that her relationship with her husband, estranged husband, had gone downhill after their separation in 2015, and that in recent times it had turned nasty. Erin Patterson is said to have told the child protection worker that she felt isolated from Don and Gail Patterson. So these are her in-laws, and that, she was very fond of them, but was feeling isolated, and that hoped this lunch would be a way to kind of bring them back together. Now, Simon Patterson wasn't in court today and, not able to take the stand to defend allegations that he was nasty or anything like that. But what Simon has previously told the trial is that he and his wife were on speaking terms, and we've seen text messages that do back that up. But he said, look, there had been a growing tension between the two around disputes over their kids' schooling and other financial things.
Yeah, it was interesting hearing a bit more about those kind of family dynamics and what was happening throughout this period as well. It is, kind of worth mentioning as well that we heard from Katrina Cripps that Erin told her she was considering changing her phone number because she was a bit worried about security. And also you'll notice, as we've been talking about Katrina Cripps, this is a woman from Child Protection. We haven't mentioned the children at all. We are getting a lot of questions about Erin Patterson's children. They're being emailed to mushroomcasedaily@abc.net.au. At this point, the jury hasn't heard anything about Erin Patterson, the location or where Erin Patterson's children are staying. And even if we are told where they, what is happening with that, we will need to be really careful just around some of the laws that we have to follow and be mindful of. So if there's something we can bring you, we will. But just keep that in mind when you're flicking your questions to us. Speaking of questions, Kristian, we are getting plenty into the Mushroom Case Daily inbox, mushroomcasedaily@abc.net.au. Got one here from Molly. Lines up today actually quite nicely with some of the evidence that we've heard from Dr. Juror. Molly asks, I'm not really clear on how toxic death cap mushrooms are. What is considered a lethal dosage, and how does that compare to what is believed that the guests consumed?
Thanks for the question, Molly. So Dr. Dimitri Gerostomoulos spoke about this exact topic of how much is deadly. So I'll just read you the transcript of what he said. So he said for a 70 kilogram adult, it's about 50 grams of these deadly amatoxins that can kill you. Now, he said this estimate is based off studies that have been done on mice, rats and dogs. They're not studies that have been directly derived from humans for obvious reasons, but he said they were very toxic compounds. As for how much exactly the lunch guests consumed, that is obviously a bit more of a difficult task to calculate because you've got a whole bunch of variables there. But in terms of what we know about how much they all ate, Ian Wilkinson and I believe Erin Patterson have said the same story, that Ian and Heather ate one portion each of the beef Wellingtons, and that Gail Patterson ate half, Don ate his serving and half of Gail's. As for how much Erin ate, an important question, Katrina Cripps said that she had been told by Erin that it was approximately half a portion.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Kristian. We have another question here from Kate. This is around some of the questioning we heard from the defence yesterday to one of my colleagues, Dr. Tom May, about mushroom identification, how hard it is to identify death cap mushrooms. Kate's question is, Kate's asking or saying, one thing that I'm puzzled about is why the defence is focusing so much on mushroom identification. It kind of feels like they're trying to build the case that Erin mistakenly picked the wrong mushrooms. However, she's always asserted that she purchased them and didn't pick them herself. Have I missed something important here?
Hey, Kate, I don't think you've missed anything. Just like us, we're sitting through this trial, hearing all the evidence kind of being just dumped on us, right? So at the very beginning of the trial, we got some neat openings from the prosecution and from the defence, and now we're getting a whole bunch of information given to us. So I think it will all be neatly wrapped up by both sides at the very end. What we have heard from many people is that Erin Patterson claims that she bought some of the mushrooms from an Asian grocer, and what her defence barrister Colin Mandy also said in his openings was that Erin Patterson admits foraging for mushrooms. He didn't specify when, he didn't specify how, he didn't specify why.
Thank you, Kristian, and thank you, Kate. That's a wonderful question. If you have a question that you'd like us to answer on Mushroom Case Daily, send us an email, mushroomcasedaily@abc.net.au, and we'll try and get to it. Also, if you would like to rate and review Mushroom Case Daily on the podcast app you're using, that would be very much appreciated. It helps other people find us. And of course, make sure you grab the ABC Listen app and follow Mushroom Case Daily there. That way you won't miss an update. Kristian, what's the plan for tomorrow?
It's only a half day in court and I'm pretty exhausted, to be honest. It's been a pretty dense week and this is pretty normal for trials. You know, you really have to get into the weeds towards the middle of the trial. So congrats to everyone who stuck it through. We're nearly at the end. Dr. Jurostomoulos' evidence is going to continue tomorrow and we'll be wrapping up the week's evidence in our episode tomorrow.
We're back in your feed then.
Mushroom Case Daily is produced by ABC Audio Studios and ABC News. It's presented by me, court reporter Kristian Silva, and producer Stephen Stockwell.
Our executive producer is Claire Rawlinson, and many thanks to the Victorian Newsroom and Audio Studios manager Eric George, and our true crime colleagues Tim Roxburgh, Rachel Brown, and Yasmin Parry for helping make this show a reality. This episode was produced on the land of the Gunai-Kurnai people.
You've been listening to an ABC podcast. Discover more great ABC podcasts, live radio and exclusives on the ABC Listen app.
Pop culture hot takes are everywhere.
But only one podcast helps you figure out what they really mean.
Stop everything! It's the place for you to unapologetically overthink pop culture.
With me, Beverly Wang.
And me, Hannah Reish.
Find Stop Everything now on the ABC Listen app.